Well, good morning, everyone. We'll take just a second here and get my content up.
All right.
Okay, all right. So we're going to start today talking a little bit about resolutions, or more accurately, all the things that we know we need to do, and we'll talk a little bit more about how we might be able to do them. The hope today is to share with you folks many things that you're probably very familiar with from a resolution standpoint, but maybe just some ideas that might help you as you get started through the next year. My name is Shon Isenhour, as Maureen said, and I am very thankful to be here today. I will also share with you a little bit about me and my background, because that will come into play as we talk about some of the examples. So you may have seen my reliabilitynow.com blog, but we do keep a lot of the content, some of the things that we'll be talking about today, up on that blog available. So you can go through. There are about 175 posts available over the last 4 or 5 years. And so if you're looking for a quick topic, and I'll talk about Toolbox Topics a little later, but you may be able to find some things you can use there. A little bit about my background. I've worked in about 35 different countries over the last 15 or so years. A lot of my focus has been around implementing this idea of holistic reliability. So, what do I need to do? What do I need to have into place? How do they connect together? What do I do first? What do I do second? What's going to give me the most value from a reducing downtime and increasing profitability standpoint? So today we will talk about the resolutions themselves. What I thought would be cool is to at least give you a little bit of a look into the individual facilities that have all had these resolutions or these ideas that they wanted to accomplish in the past. And then I'll share with you some steps to implement as we go forward. So as you guys know, resolution season is upon us. If you're like me, you've got all kinds of things you want to try to do. The common ones: lose weight. I was in the gym the other day with about 700 of my closest friends. It was a pretty amazing moment. I'm just hoping they leave soon. But so many of us want to get in shape every year, and we try to kick it off at the beginning of the year. Many of us want to learn a new skill, whether that be learning to play the guitar or learning to do some hobby better than what we've been able to do it in the past. And I think all of us could agree we probably would like to lower our stress levels. I certainly would, especially after this last year. But nonetheless, these are the kinds of things that we plan and we talk about in this first month of the year. The unfortunate part is, by February, most of us have moved on to life as it was before, and I think that's very common with a lot of change initiatives in a lot of facilities, and we'll talk more about that as we get into that section today. So here's my list of resolutions that we're going to go through, and these are a little bit mom and pop and apple pie. There's nothing here that's new and exciting, but most of those resolutions I mentioned on the previous pages aren't new and exciting either. We've seen those things. We've made promises in the past that we were going to do those things. So what I'm going to do is take us through each of these 7, plus I've got a little bonus resolution I'll share at the end. So the first one we're going to talk about is expanding maintenance planning past outage work. And this goes specifically to a facility that really wanted to move on to planning their day in and day out activities. The second resolution we'll talk about is allowing the equipment to talk to us using condition-based tools like the ultrasonic equipment from UE, as well as many other technologies that are out there today, and we'll dive into that a little bit. The third resolution that we'll talk about is building our schedule 4 weeks in advance, and I've got a quick video I'll show you in that area. It comes from one of our e-learning modules. It'll give you a quick look at this concept of actually putting work out there on that schedule 4 weeks out. The fourth one that we'll talk about is solving problems and eliminating reoccurring failures. Every year I hear many sites talk about the fact that this is the year we're going to apply the tools of root cause analysis and we're going to get rid of these reoccurring failures. So we'll talk about that resolution. The fifth resolution is training, and it's training in best practices. And one of the issues that I see, and one of the thoughts that really hit my mind, especially over the last couple of days as I prepare for some other speaking engagements, is at the end of the day, you can't have reliability, good reliability, without good training, because there's so many facets of communicating this new state, this new way of doing business, that if you can't convey those and get application, you're going to struggle. So we'll talk a little bit about how we take training and drive forward our resolution. The sixth one we'll talk about is our EAMs, or our CMMSs. Some folks refer to those. That is Enterprise Asset Management System, or Computerized Maintenance Management System, and how we're using that and how much data we're collecting. And is that data just going in one way, or are we pulling out meaningful results that we're able to make decisions with from that data? The seventh resolution we'll talk about today is proactive leadership. And this is really, I'm going to focus today specifically on communication. So if you want to take these resolutions out and move them into the facility, how best can you communicate that moving forward? So the first resolution that we'll spend a few minutes with, and you'll notice the pattern as we go forward. I'll go through each of the resolutions, and then I'll show you a few tips and tricks and maybe a single point lesson or a video to drive home some of the points. So the first resolution is, of course, expanding maintenance planning past outage work. And I do go into a lot of good facilities that from an outage standpoint, they do plan, they do schedule, they do lay everything out, they know their critical path, they really show many best practices from an outage planning standpoint. But then when you turn around, like this paper mill that we're talking about here, when you turn around and look into the day in and day out activities, it's just a smorgasbord of reactive behavior. It's no job plans. It's do whatever you want to do. Nobody does the job the same way. And my belief is that that's the reason that they have to do a lot of the work that they do on the outages. So let's look at that. You know, what's the value? Why would I want to plan the work? And I know many of you guys are pretty comfortable that planned work has a value. The statistics tell us that that if I plan and schedule that work for execution, it's about 3 to 5 times less expensive than going out into the organization and doing an emergent repair. Now, people sometimes ask, why? Well, you know, if you think about that emergent repair, it's going to possibly require overtime. It could possibly require FedExing or overnighting or buying a seat on an airplane to get parts that you need to complete that repair. It's going to have the lack of a job plan, so it may not be done correctly, or it may not be done in the most efficient manner. They may do the wrong task or use the wrong tools. When you think about all those issues that can come up with that unplanned work, then you can begin to see that 3 to 5 times greater expense. Planned work allows for precision maintenance. You know, I know that a torque wrench is the right thing to do, but I may not remember that torque setting that I need. So if I can build a job plan that tells me what torque settings I need, or what belt tensions I need, or what the correct parts are, instead of just guessing or using the storeroom as a Walmart and just finding one that fits, all of those things will drive a better performance moving forward. Planned work allows the right people. You know, in this facility, what they would do is they would just throw the work out there, and whoever was available would go tackle the jobs. Now, that doesn't mean whoever's the most talented or skilled in that area. It literally means whatever warm body was available. And then planned work lowers infant mortality and reoccurring failures. So if you think about precision maintenance, if you think about getting the right parts, you think about getting the right people, then you can understand that we're going to do that job more effectively and not induce many of the infant mortality issues that we have from a reliability standpoint. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about infant mortality later, but I think that's one of the big things that we get out of planning. So the first thing I think a lot of facilities have to do, they have to define what planning is. You know, it's interesting. I don't really care where you go in the world, whether it's China, whether it's Europe. Everyone struggles a little bit with the definitions or the difference between planning and scheduling. So if I want to have a job plan, that doesn't mean fix the pump on Thursday. It really has to be the who, the how, but not the when. All right. So we're gonna focus in on, you know, what are the steps, what are the items that need to be done, how should they be done, who is best equipped to do those, what trade or what skill do they need, And then once we determine all of those things, then we'll move over to scheduling it and putting it at a certain block of time. The next thing is you can't do it all at once. You know, it's very tough to start planning if you think that everything you put out next week is going to be a planned job. It's just not a real likely possibility. So one of the things I recommend for a lot of folks is begin planning with a different colored work order paper. If you're printing out your work orders, if you're using an electronic device, you can use flags and colors on those as well. But the idea here is, hey guys, when you go to do this job, we have taken the time to plan it. Please take a look. Give us feedback. Review and see if we've really made it more efficient and more effective going forward, and use that to be more efficient going forward. So using colors or using flags in the e-learning world can really help as you start to build this, and then people will know that, hey, these are different. You want to begin to build a job plan library, because the more job plans that I can have readily available and pre-planned, the easier it becomes to increase the amount of planned work. One of the things that helps here is to plan your bigger jobs out, and then you can use the steps within those bigger jobs to break down into smaller jobs that you might do on a more frequent basis. So for instance, if you have a gearbox and you want to write down a full job plan for how to remove and disassemble that gearbox, the next time when I just need to remove it, or I just need to remove a cover, I can take that section of the job plan, apply it to the work order, and as a planner I'll be moving a lot faster to getting those job plans out there and prepared. Big point for job plans, obviously it includes the safety steps, it includes the precision maintenance, the tolerances, the clearances, anything that I need to know that I probably do not have readily available in my head. And your goal is to make sure that when you write that job plan for your facility, that it's repeatable no matter who you put into that role, as long as they have the appropriate skills and background. So this is a little bit about job planning, and I won't spend a lot of time here today, but I did want to at least just show you guys this mental model. And this is the first of one of the single point lessons that I'll share with you today. And what you see here is just a way for you to go back and explain why we need to plan, why we need to schedule, and how that affects the organization. So the gray cloud you see at the top, that is the forecast. Those are the items that are coming into the system. Those are maybe some things that you've taken the UE gun out and you've identified that we have a defect. They're coming in for work planning and scheduling. So let's say we found an air leak out in one of the compressed air lines. That is actually one of the little dots of water that's just directly below that cloud. When that work gets approved to then be planned and executed, then it is entering into that funnel and becomes part of what we call total backlog. Now, total backlog is all the hours that you have in your process that is approved for execution over the next however many weeks that you have. And the idea here is, if everyone were dedicated to solely focusing on total backlog, from a maintenance standpoint, how many weeks would it take? The target or the goal for total backlog is 4 to 6 weeks. So that means in 6 weeks of focusing on nothing but the work that's in that backlog, that should all be gone. All right? Once that PDM technology has identified, or any other part of your organization has identified that work, it's been approved, it is in the total backlog, then the planner grabs a hold of that job. And when the planner grabs that job and adds those steps, then it becomes part of the ready backlog. So to be in that ready backlog area, it needs to have the parts that are associated with it, the special tools, any of the steps identified, so that literally if I could pull an individual raindrop or an individual job out of that ready backlog, it could be executed if the equipment was down. Now the paradigm shift here, and one of the things that I like to explain using this model, is that while today you probably schedule based on your total backlog, if the really effective facilities that really adhere to their schedule, they are scheduling strictly from the ready backlog and not the total backlog. So they're taking that ready backlog list of enough work to add up to 2 to 4 weeks. They're sending that out to operations. They're sending it out to maintenance. Both of those folks are looking at that information. They're deciding, okay, all right, what do I need to have done next week or the following week? And they're getting that back to the scheduler, the planner and the scheduler, depending on how you divided those disciplines out. And the scheduler is then taking the high priority things from the operations list. He's taking the high priority things from that maintenance list. He's obviously bringing over the PM and PDM activities that need to be done. And then he's looking at the available downtime and the available craft hours or overtime hours or contractor hours that are available, and he's crafting what will become your schedule. If you go through that process, your Thursday scheduling meeting, and notice I didn't call it a planning meeting, but your Thursday scheduling meeting, you're locking in that schedule, you're signing it, you're having operations and maintenance sign it saying this is our contract for performance for the next year, or for the next week, I'm sorry. So in doing that, now you've got a executable schedule that they've both had their needs met and they've agreed that they'll support it going forward, which gives that schedule a lot more power to be effective. Now there's a lot more information contained in these single point lessons. I really should call them multi-point lessons. You're welcome to use them. They're available on my blog, and of course they're available in this presentation. So the second thing that I want to cover today is using the condition-based tools, using those predictive maintenance tools to allow the equipment to talk to us. The first facility that came to mind that we worked with recently was a food producer. And in this food facility, they had relied on PM inspections almost exclusively in the past. Those PM inspections had driven a very high cost of maintenance, a very high level of downtime, and unfortunately led to some fines really far back or far or close to the point of failure on the P to F curve. So they weren't getting the results that they needed, and they were having a lot of trouble really taking that next step. So what their objective was for the year was to really take those PDM tools and embrace them and use them to both do inspections while the assets are running, not requiring downtime, but also to find those defects within those pieces of equipment as early as possible so that they had more time to plan and schedule that work, therefore having less downtime, having less materials costs, and having less overall total maintenance costs. So as they went through that, some of the steps that they had to go through, and this is some of the things that you might do as well. The first thing you want to do is to begin to engage your planning and scheduling and get that piece to where it can do what it's supposed to do. Because let's be honest, if you take the predictive tools and you run out through the facility and start finding all these defects everywhere, if you don't have a planning and scheduling process, all you're doing is finding a whole bunch of defects that you're going to run to failure anyway. So you want to make sure you've got planning and scheduling robust enough that it can take the input from all of the condition-based tools. Once you've got that piece in place, the next step is to really understand the common failure modes. Look at your critical equipment. Understand how it's going to fail, what the most common ways are, and what technologies then can be used to find those defects as early as possible. You can do that using an FMEA, or there are other tools on the market that are libraries of known failure modes for various asset types and classes. If you want to know more about that, reach out to me and I'll point you in the right direction. So once you've understood all of those common failure modes, now we can begin to map the technologies. You know, we can take the predictive tools like the ultrasound or the vibration or the infrared or the oil analysis, and we can say, okay, what do these technologies find? How can they work together? How can they support each other? And how can that give us as much time as possible to execute repairs on these defects? So then you get into this whole discussion of, you know, what technology first? You know, do I go with UE first? Do I go with vibration first? Do I go with any one of the other technologies? And I'd say this really depends on your individual situation. You may want to use the tools you already have if you already have some PDM tools in place, so you can keep that in mind. But the big thing to think about is what are those most common predominant failure modes within your facility and what technologies can detect those. In other words, how much good are you going to get out of that technology versus the cost of training and the cost of the tools. The next thing you'll see is displaying or advertising your catches. So as you get out there and you start finding that bearing that was failing or that gearbox that had broken teeth, show that to the rest of the organization, because to be honest, most of them think that it's just, you know, some magical box you're walking around with, and they don't really have a whole lot of value associated to it. So anytime you can kind of advertise or market the success you're having with the condition-based tools, that's going to give them the trust to call you over and have you help them out and really get more engaged moving forward. So number 8 is evaluating your results, and I labeled this one PM or PDMG, and that stands for Predictive Maintenance Generated. It's just a work order type, but you know, are you, for the PMs or the PDMs that you're doing, are you finding failures, and are you finding them early enough to get them planned and scheduled? And you can track that by using that work code within your CMMS or your EAM. Expand the program to new technologies and cover additional assets, less critical assets as you see fit. That's kind of that last step of continuous improvement as you're growing the program further and further. Now, many of you have probably seen this graphic. I use it a lot. It's another one of our very common single point lessons. A couple things here to note, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time with it today, but 2 big things. If you'll notice in the equipment failure patterns, the first thing you see there is that age-related failures only make up about 11%, and about 89% are in the random category. If you think about that, that really builds a bigger case for predictive maintenance, because if it's a random failure, what I really then have to do is find it as soon as I can so that I can plan and schedule that. And that's the I to P to F curve you see down in the lower corner. Now, a lot of folks do struggle with these 2 concepts because it seems like, you know, is there really 68% of my assets failing every time I start them up? And the answer is no. No, 68% are not failing instantaneously or, you know, running to a failed state to which they can't any longer allow you to do what that piece of equipment was designed to do. But here is what is in that 68%, and I think this is a key point that made it real for me when I had this realization. 68% of the ways that your assets are going to fail is indeed infant mortality, but do remember they then have to follow that P to F curve. And for some components, that P to F curve can be weeks, months, years. I've seen some low-speed bearings that run with defects for 10 years before they fail. So you really, you know, just because it doesn't fail the day you start it up doesn't mean that you didn't install that bearing with a hammer and induce a failure into that bearing on day 1, which is infant mortality. It's still got to follow through that P to F curve. So just a little something to remember from that standpoint. So the third one we're going to talk about today is building our schedule 4 weeks in advance. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a quick video here that describes that process a little bit. Now, I am on a pretty slow internet connection, so there's a pretty good chance the voice won't be quite synced up. But when you view this on our website or within some of our modules, you can get a much better experience. But I definitely wanted you guys to be able to hear and see this concept of scheduling 4 weeks out in advance. So there are a couple things you need, and for this one, this came from a plastic converting facility that wanted to lower their maintenance costs, and really and truly, they wanted less trauma with operations. It was very hard for them to get downtime that they needed to make the repairs that they knew the equipment needed. So what they were able to do was begin to build this schedule 4 weeks in advance. That gives operations a real good look at the downtime that's coming up, and it helped to build a better relationship between those 2 parts of the organization. Now, a couple things you're going to need. If you want to build a schedule 4 weeks in advance, you've got to have the predictive technologies out there identifying failures early enough that you can put them out on the schedule for 4 weeks. That's a big driver to make this work correctly. The second thing is you've got to have good, accurate time estimates because we don't want to put something out there 4 weeks. Even though we may refine it as it gets closer, we want to make sure that we're not taking up too much time and really able to budget exactly what we need moving forward. Now, some of the benefits: it's going to take less time in your Thursday scheduling meeting. It's going to increase your resource utilization. And if you're using rental equipment like JLG lifts or any of those kinds of things, now you're going to be able to group those things together that need that equipment. So maybe instead of having it on site all the time, you just bring it in when you need it for those jobs that you plan 3 or 4 weeks out in advance. So I'm going to start this video. We're only going to watch just a little bit of it. If you want to see more of this video, it's part of our Sustaining Skills video series, and I can help you find that via my email at the end.
I've got Hello and welcome to the Coach's Corner. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the scheduling side of the planning and scheduling process. I've got a couple things here in front of me, some glasses, a couple of rocks. Wanted to share with you kind of what the model is that we're using here today. So each one of these rocks represents a job. This is a little bit more of a large rock. May represent a job that has multiple crafts, maybe an electrician, mechanic, working together. It also has multiple hours, so it's a bigger piece of our scheduling process. This is a smaller rock here, and this smaller rock may represent a job that just has 2 electricians, or maybe even only 1 electrician, and an hour or 2 of time. What I'm going to talk about is how we take those jobs and we sequence them into the schedule 4 weeks in advance. So if we look down at our glasses, a couple things you see here. The first glass is a completely full schedule, or nearly full. And this represents next week's schedule. So we're going to move that over here in a few minutes, and we're going to execute that work. Now, at the 2-week out mark, you see this one isn't quite full yet. We've still got some room within the schedule. We'll be adding more jobs to it as it gets closer to the execution date. As we move out to the third glass here, the third glass has less rocks in it, but it still has a few jobs that we've put in there that we know are coming up, and we want to sequence those a little further out. And then 4 weeks out, the last job, or the last glass that you see here, you'll see that they have 1 or 2 jobs in there, not many there. The point is, as time goes on, this work will get executed, and then we'll come in and start to fill up the rest of this schedule, and that will become the schedule that gets executed the next week. And then as time goes on, this one will move down into that position as well. The idea here is we're planning 4 weeks in advance. It gives us good visibility into the future. We know where those big jobs are going to be, and we can really plan for those jobs before they get to the point of execution. Okay, we talked a little bit about scheduling 4 weeks in advance.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there, and this gets into a little bit more of the detail of how to plan within the week, but we'll save that one for another day. So the next thing I want to talk about, or the next big idea or concept, is problem solving. And problem solving is something that all of us say we want to do. I've never been into a facility that didn't say, yeah, we're working on it, we're trying to get better at it, but to be honest, very few really do it well. So this was a wood products facility. They had a history of reoccurring failures, the same equipment with the same things happening over and over. They had just really accepted that that was the norm, that that's how it happens here. That piece of equipment runs this number of days and then it fails. So with that said, they wanted to put in problem solving, and it has been very successful for those guys because they've been able to eliminate many of their reoccurring failures. 3 things that you want to focus on when you talk about the reoccurring failures. The first, you need a process. And you need a process to determine both when you're going to do root cause, but when you're not going to do root cause. Because it can be very easy for someone to get excited about root cause, and then every time you turn around, they want you to do another investigation and another investigation and another investigation. If you don't have enough resources in the facility to A, do the root cause analysis itself, and B, implement all the findings of each of those root cause analysis investigations, then there's no value in doing the root cause. So you need to have some things in your process, triggers if you will, that keep you at a level that you can meet. And when you start early on, that may be a lower level. And then over time, you may allow for more and more root cause investigations per month as you get better and better at the process, and you can solve more and more of your problems. I'm going to quickly introduce this concept of transitional root cause. It's a methodology that we developed to really make things easier. We felt like there were so many other problem-solving methodologies out there, and a lot of folks were struggling with embracing, what to use when. So I'm going to show you just a small piece of the 10 tools that we teach. But it's a very simple process, and all of it is about transition. And you'll see that as we go through one of the areas here in a few minutes. The last thing you see here is ensure your results. Don't just do root cause investigations to generate reports. If you're not going to take those findings and implement them, and then verify that those findings that you implemented got you the results you expected, then don't waste your time. So let's take a look at a couple of things here. First, this is one of those single point lessons. And I wanted to share this with you to let you see what we're talking about when we talk about transitional root cause. Now, many of you may have 5 whys within your organization, especially if you're using Lean or Six Sigma. A lot of folks will include 5 whys. And 5 whys, it is a tool that we use in the root cause world, but it doesn't always get us to the best root cause. So the blue lines here, you can see those boxes connected by those blue lines. There's some gray ones and there's some blue ones. The blue ones represent the 5 whys. And what we're simply doing is saying, okay, here's this problem that has occurred. Why did it occur? And then why did that happen? And then why did that happen? And why did that happen? It allows us to really begin to build a culture of root cause. All right? The problem is, and I'm going to flip back and talk about this, but the problem is if you've got multiple things going on within the facility or multiple things coming together to give you a problem, you're going to miss all but one causal chain. So if you think about it, and I'll make this one really simple, if you think about fire, if we had a fire in our parts room, there are a couple things that had to occur for that fire to happen. The first thing that had to occur is there had to be an ignition source. The second thing that had to occur was there had to be some kind of a source of oxygen. The third thing that had to occur is we had to have fuel for that fire to burn on. So those are 3 things. And this is just a simple example today, but if you were just using 5 whys, you would have missed 2 out of the 3. All right? And that can be okay some days because you may get the right one, but other days you may miss some really, really key points and don't lower the risk as much as you had hoped. So if we transition from that 5 why blue box there to that branched out 5 whys that you see by adding in the gray boxes, now we have what we call a fault tree. If you take that fault tree and you add 2 little simple symbols to it, and an or as I like to call them, the tombstone and the Star Trek symbol, if you add those 2 things in, now you can begin to see a little more about the dynamics of the problem, and that becomes what we call a logic tree. So I'll give you an example when you might use each of those tools. Of course, 5 whys is great for solving problems in the minute on the floor and creating that culture. But maybe now you want to make a firmer investigation and you're starting to break that problem down into all the different things that came together to allow the incident to occur. And then you realize maybe you don't have enough data in a few of those areas to really focus in on what actually happened. A good example might be a bearing that has spun in the housing to the point that it is now melted down and I can no longer see the elements in the cage and all those sort of things. If that's the case, it's going to be very hard for me to determine whether it was a lubrication issue or whether it was an alignment issue or whether it was any one of a number of causes. So those might become gray boxes that we put an or on. So for each of those ors, I have to implement a solution for each of those or accept the fact that I may have more risk than I've been able to eliminate. So as you go back through, 5 whys solves problems on the floor. Fault tree allows us to branch out and see all the things that came together to give us that solution. And logic tree is added in when there's multiple things that may have had to happen at the same time, or when you have multiple things and you're not sure which one actually did happen. So that's a quick look at one type of transitional root cause. We also talk about time as another element and how you can branch out on time and use that within an investigation. And then we also talk about using FMEA tools and some of those more complex tools to allow us to really look into a problem and understand the more complex, bigger problems. If you want to learn more about it, reach out to me and we'll talk more. I love sharing it, and it's a big part of fixing a lot of facilities. So the 5th one we're going to talk about today is best practices, or the way we convey knowledge to the organization. A pharmaceutical company came to us, and they're really struggling with getting reliability out to their organization. They've put people through training. They've put people through RCM training and RCA training. They've put people through reliability training and planning and scheduling. But unfortunately, they either don't use it enough or they have forgotten by the time that they need to use it, then they're just not getting the results that they need. So what we were able to do is we were able to put together a system for them that includes both the face-to-face training but also e-learning. And that e-learning allows them to then go through and apply each of those things in that e-learning environment before going out and doing it in the real world. When they do it in the real world, our project coaches work with them to make sure they're applying each of the tools correctly. You know, maybe they're using one of those root cause tools we just saw, so they show us that fault tree and we say, okay, good, did you think about this? Did you put these things into place? So we're coaching them through, giving them that thorough understanding of how to use this going forward. And then we use videos and toolbox topics and that sort of thing to reinforce it. We have a series of sustaining skills videos that they're using, so when they get ready to go do a root cause investigation or an RCM analysis, they can quickly go through those videos on demand, take a look at them, feel comfortable that they're now ready to get out in front of a group of their peers and do that RCA or do that RCM. So those have been really powerful for that pharmaceutical company in allowing them to both teach their employees the things that they need to be more reliable, but also ensure that they're being applied and ensure that they're being applied the same way across multiple facilities. So it gives them a lot of power. I've showed you guys as we've gone through a little bit of the video component of this, but I wanted to show you a little bit around the toolbox topics. And toolbox topics really are about making reliability part of the day-in activities. And if you think about safety over the last 10 years, we've done a great job with that. We've improved safety in most of our facilities. And one of the ways we've done that is it's always in the forefront. We have that safety toolbox talk every morning before folks go out into the facility. What if we did the same thing for reliability? So just 5 minutes spent talking about how to align a shaft or how to use belt tension or how to use a bearing heater. All of those things could then be conveyed over to the greater craftsman as part of that toolbox talk before they go out every day. And this has a twofold benefit. The first is, of course, that we're conveying that out and making people aware of things like, say, the bearing heater. And that's good. But even better than that, if you allow different people in your organization to teach these 5-minute topics, what you get is a real intense learning experience for them, because you really don't know a topic until you've gone out and actually taught it. If you've got to get in front of a group and defend it and convey it in a good way, you're going to have a good understanding of it. So not only are we communicating out those best practices, a few folks as they present them are getting a really in-depth look and understanding around those practices. So definitely want to find your resources, find your places that you can get information for Toolbox Talks. I like using blogs. There are a lot of great blogs out there. In fact, if you go to my blog, reliabilitynow.com, roll down the side of the page, you can find a list of a lot of other people's blogs that are in our industry. So you can go out and see what they're talking about and the things that they're doing, and those can become fodder for these toolbox topics. You can go to the OEM sites and tool manuals and even plant communications that are coming out on a regular basis. But you know, another place that has really come to the forefront recently is YouTube and Google. You can go in there and find all kinds of videos that really show folks how to do reliability well. So those can be great resources to use when you're trying to determine what toolbox topics to do. Wanted to give you a few examples, and I've got a couple here. Anything from how to create a fault tree in RCA. You could go through and talk about shiv and pulley alignment tools, or performing an FMEA, a failure modes effects analysis. Any of those topics could be something you could explain to the craftsman to, again, to kind of drive that reinforced behavior that reliability is important here. Now, I love single point or 1 point lessons. Now, you'll notice most of mine really ought to be called 1,000 point lessons, because there's a lot of content in there and they can be used a lot of different ways. But you may want to sit down and think about, you know, how could I create some little documents that explain what it is we're trying to do, why we're doing it, how it affects them, but also what it is that we want them to do differently. And these single point lessons can be a great way to do that. I've shared a couple with you today in some of the others. What I wanted to talk about here is just sprinkling those things out through the organization. Leave them on the tables in the lunchroom. You know, put them up on the bathroom door. I don't care. Just make sure that they're out there where folks are seeing them on a regular basis. I personally know that in the morning I will read the back of a cereal box every single morning. So there's an idea. Take it out there, put it in that break room. There's a pretty good chance if they're sitting there while they're eating, they're going to slide that thing over and take a look at it. And we've had another exposure to reliability. You can also use posters or daily management boards and many other areas to show and feature these single point or 1 point lessons. Now, I really like, and we do this especially in our e-learning, I like people to be able to practice in a safe environment and understand the concept before they have to get out in front of their peers. Because one of the things we've learned from an education standpoint is many people don't change because they're scared of how they'll be perceived by others, or they're not comfortable that they won't fail when they get in front of others. So a lot of what we do in our training is build these simulations that they can play with. And you'll see me moving the speed knob down at the bottom of the screen. And as I move that speed, you can see there is a shaft, and that shaft is speeding up. So I can begin to see what's going on. I can begin to really understand a concept that would be a little harder to see out in the real world. So when that shaft, which happens to be out of alignment, rotates faster and faster, I can see what that does to the dial indicator. And then if you look a little further over, I can see what's happening on the chart recorder that shows me that time waveform or what's actually happening. So we would use this to help people understand vibration. But we can also use it to show someone what happens when you align that shaft. So if you think about how much energy is in that spectrum or in that time waveform right now, you can see there's a lot going on. There's a lot of movement. But by simply aligning that shaft, and you'll see me moving it down there, you can see how much energy is taken out of that system. Now I can understand why aligning that shaft is important, because I can see that I've taken a lot of that energy out of the system, and that energy is what's trying to tear that piece of equipment apart day in and day out. So we use a lot of these simulations. You may be able to do the same thing within your organization. They don't have to all be in e-learning applications. You may be able to build some of them out of scraps laying around the shop. But give them a place to really begin to understand that concept before they have to go out in the real world and talk and convey it. Here's another example. We're finding more and more a lot of folks don't understand machinery dynamics because they haven't been introduced to it. Maybe they're coming out of college, they've got a great understanding of computers and some of those things, but they really don't understand what makes a motor work. So we build in a lot of animations to ours. This happens to be a motor, and you can see the poles appearing. And now you see the casing, and now it's all coming together, and I can begin to see how that unloaded motor works. See if you can find models for common things within your facility where people can see views or see into things that they wouldn't normally be able to see. Because if you don't understand all the different parts, the stator of the rotor, all the things that are inside the motor, then how are you going to understand why it shorts out or why a rotor bar broke or cracked or loose is a problem if you don't really know what's going on in there? So these can be very powerful for you as you move forward. We also use variable paths in our e-learning, and I think you would definitely want to do the same because not everybody in your organization has the same level of understanding about all the topics. So some folks may have a good understanding, others may need more detail. We do that through these branching scenarios. So based on the answer that they select, they're sent down different paths where they'll learn more detail if they show that they don't understand the topic, or they'll get less detail if they do understand the topic. The idea here is that when we want everybody to go through the training, we don't want people testing out because we want to make sure when they come out the other end they're all using the same processes and the same language and they can talk to each other, whether they went through the full training or the lesser level based on their maturity. So the sixth topic we're going to talk about today is capturing data within your CMMS. And really this is one of those that you just have to do. There's not an easy way to do it. There's not a silver bullet. There's not something I can give you today that's just going to fix all your woes in the CMMS category. But the things to think about is, do you have a functional hierarchy? I mean, have you gone through and built out all of the assets within your facility and how they relate to the various components underneath them? Because that's going to provide you a lot of information from a reliability standpoint, both on various asset classes, but also on areas of your facility and the cost associated to them. The next thing that you definitely want to do in your CMMS and EAM, and in this plastics molding company, this is something they hadn't done, was to create failure modes or failure codes. And the failure codes are there to, again, allow us to sort the data and understand where we're seeing common things happening over and over. Because this then engages our root cause analysis or a problem-solving process. You want to define what good work completion looks like. I mean, how many times have you guys opened up a CMMS system and seen something like motor broke, and then the completion statement is fixed it? You know, as a reliability engineer, it's very hard for me to do anything with that. You know, what was broke about it? Was it shorted out? Was it the bearings were bad? You know, what really happened, and what should I do to prevent those things from happening in the future? So if you can begin to build failure codes and then add in that completion standard, now as a reliability engineer, I can get to the data with the failure codes and understand the data with the completion comments. Don't just do a drive-by. So many people out there today think a CMMS implementation is when somebody comes to a plant for 2 weeks, trains a couple people, and goes on about their business. I see it over and over, and I call those drive-by implementations. If you want results from, I don't care if it's SAP, Maximo, Oracle, any of them, you've got to train your folks, and you've got to train them based on who they are and what their role is in the organization. A planner doesn't need the same training that a maintenance supervisor needs. So take the time to understand what they're going to do in the CMMS and train them to those tasks. The next area for using your EAM and CMMS better, and this again was another big area for the plastics molding company, don't create a data graveyard. In other words, don't create a place where people put a lot of data into the system, but at the end of the day, nobody ever pulls it out. So build good reports. Find ways to pull by failure code or by asset class or by hierarchy level, and really use the data that you're collecting, because when you start using it, then people are going to see the value and they'll start to put more information into the system and build upon it. And that really leads to the last piece. You know, so many decisions are made in production facilities today based on emotion. So many decisions are made in organizations based on emotion. So if we can take this data and make database decisions, now, even if we don't get what we want, we know that we made a decision based on real facts. The next area that I want to talk about, this is our 7th area today, and this is all about proactive leadership. And this was in an automotive facility, and they had a history of flavor of the month, reactive implementations, and doomed initiatives. It just seemed like everything they rolled out, you could just plan on it failing within 6 to 9 months. So if you're in a similar situation within your facility, the first thing you're going to want to do is define that initiative, define and create a vision for where you're going. Define the individual goals, and then break those goals down into the steps that it's going to take to get there. Now you want to then take those steps and figure out what's the risk or what could prevent these steps from giving us the results that we expected in the goals. You can do that using the old FMEA tool. You can simply take your failure modes effects analysis and simply say, what is this initiative supposed to do? What are the steps supposed to do? What are we doing today that allows us to do those? What could we do better? What could go wrong that would prevent those things from giving us the results we expected? It's all there right within that FMEA tool, because that's designed to look at risk of an asset, and we can use that just to look at risk within this organizational change. So once you define the risk and the goals, now you can start to think about a communication plan. With multiple medias, you don't just want to send emails to tell people about things. You may want to put a video out there. You may want to make an e-learning module, or you may want to have a face-to-face training session or a hands-on session. But you want to create all the different ways that you're going to communicate each of the steps that need to occur and that proactive look at what the risks are associated with failure for each of those steps. If you do that, now you're communicating in a very proactive manner, and the people are going to see that. You know, in the past, we may not have thought, well, what happens if the plant manager changes, or what happens if the union doesn't support this goal? if you do it this way, now they're going to see that you thought about that and you've got a plan in case and a strategy in case that failure occurs. So it shows that proactive way of communication that we're hoping to move them from in the reliability realm as well. So your communication plan, of course, should have multiple medias, as I said, but also consider both single and two-way communication. You can't just pump information out. Sometimes you need to ask for advice, ask how they feel about things. So make sure you got two-way. Check to make sure they truly understand what you're trying to convey. All of that is part of your two-way communication process. So don't just use one side. Make sure you have a balanced approach based on the risks that you've identified in each of the steps. Now this is one of the graphs that I use to convey this point. And what I look at here, and I'm gonna go fairly quickly through this today, but a couple key things I want you to take away, and you can get this off the blog or you can get it from the presentation. But what I'd like for you to notice is, and I'm going to take a pen here and circle a couple things. This right here is the AdCar model. It's a model that was developed for helping individuals change. It's very linear, and I really like it because it helps me think about what I need to do in an organization to make sure that they can make the changes that I need. The first step in the AdCar model is awareness. If I can make them aware of what we're trying to do, then I can create a desire to do that new way of thinking or that new process. Once I create a desire, then I can impart knowledge to them. Now, if they don't have a desire, it's going to be very hard for me to impart knowledge, just like if you guys showed up for this webinar today with no desire. I don't care how much I scream, yell, jump up and down, throw things around, circle things on the screen, and make videos. You're not going to capture any of the knowledge. So if you get the awareness, you then have the chance to create the desire. The desire allows them to accept the knowledge that you're going to give. If they accept the knowledge, you can then see the ability that they're developing, and then you can put steps in place to reinforce that new ability and make sure that it becomes the new way of doing business. So that's a really cool graphic. You can find a lot more about the AdCar model, which comes from ProSci, an organization called ProSci, if you just Google it on the web. The second thing that you see here, this is if AdCar is about how an individual changes, the box that I'm circling right now is how an organization changes. So this is called Kotter's organizational change model. It's very famous in the change management world. Take a look at it, find it on the web. It can become, if nothing else, a checklist to make sure that you're hitting all the key points. There's two other things on the graph here that I'll share with you just briefly today. The first one I'm drawing a circle around right now. That is a graphic about performance and what happens as people go through the changes that we're trying to make from a reliability standpoint. Just very briefly, you see in the beginning that their performance increases because of the Hawthorne effect, because they're excited, because their boss thinks it's important, so they think it's important. But then they're going to go through what I call the valley of despair. It's the time when they realize they still have to do it the old way and the new way. The new way is not as easy as they thought it was going to be. It's different. It doesn't feel right. But if we keep pushing and give them what they need, then they'll begin to move up the curve and get to that new level of performance. Now, if you look at the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4 that is here, those also associate directly with these boxes down here. So if you have people in your organization that are in the 1 area, what you need to do as a leader is direct them. If they're in the 2 area, the valley of despair, you need to coach them. If they're in the 3 area, you need to be supporting them. And if they're in the 4 area, you need to be delegating to them. And there's a lot more information contained within that graphic. Those two graphics come from Situational Leadership 2 by Ken Blanchard. Again, another thing that you can find very quickly by Googling it on the internet. But I wanted to share that quick lesson with you guys today. Give me just a second to turn off the pen, and we'll move on to the next slide. So that's the 7. I did want to throw in one extra one just to make you aware, and this is kind of a bonus resolution, if you will. Many of you may have heard of ISO 55000. It's becoming something of big interest to a lot of folks in our industry. The one that I'll talk about today was a water and wastewater facility, and they really wanted to tackle the ISO 55000 standard. If you Google it, again, you can find a lot of information about it. I'm going to show you a little bit in a few minutes. But when you look at the ISO 55000 standard, it's about documenting the way you do things within your organization, and making sure that you're using that standard to then eliminate risk moving forward. So key steps if you want to go after an ISO 55000 certification this year as a resolution: you need to document your existing processes and procedures. You need to identify an assessor who has the CAMA certification. And if you want to learn more about that CAMA certification, again, reach out to me and we can talk more about it. And then you seek certification as an organization. Now you may be asking, certification in what? So what I'm going to show you is the fundamentals of ISO 55000, which talks about what do your assets do, how do they provide value to the organization. Asset management is then the organizational objectives, the technical and financial decisions, the plans and activities that allow those assets to continue to provide that value. It takes leadership and workplace culture that we talked about in the previous slides to really drive this new way. Many of you may be well on your way based on some of the reliability improvements you've already made. And asset management gives us an assurance that they will fill their purpose and that those assets will give us the most value moving forward. Now this is from the gfmam.org website, or the Global Forum on Maintenance and Asset Management. You can check it out later, but it gives you more of the details of what's in the ISO 55000 standard and what asset management is in general. Here's another look at that same body of knowledge, so you can see some of the items that are included in there. And again, you can get both of these off of the GFMAM website. This is the asset management landscape, which goes into even more detail, and it's available free on that website. So I wanted to give you just a quick look at it so that you know what you're looking for when you go out to gfmam.org. So that's what I had for you guys today. I hope these are some ideas or some thoughts about what you can do this year to kind of change the way you implement reliability. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me at the email address here, Shon Isenhour at irdiciollc.com, or Isenhour at irdiciollc.com. My cell phone number is there. You're welcome to reach out to me at any time. And if you want to go to the blog and see some of these pieces and parts and little things you might use for your Toolbox Topics, that's reliabilitynow.com. I did put one link at the bottom of the screen. I did use a couple of videos today from our Sustaining Skills video series. If you'd like to see more about that, you can go to irdiciollc.com, and then you can either type in Sustaining Skills video series or click on Sustaining Skills video series under the Offerings tab. That's all I've got for you guys today. I thank you for your time. I hope it's been beneficial, and if I can help you in any way, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Shon. And we did have a couple people that were interested in seeing those videos again because, with the connection, the sound and video weren't quite linking up. So we'll be sure we get an email out with some of these links that you shared in the presentation, so don't feel like you guys have to furiously take down all this information just now. But thanks again, Shon. And as we mentioned at the beginning, for those that might have hopped on a little late, we did record the presentation, so we will put that up on our website with the rest of our webinars, so you can take a look at anything you might have missed or revisit anything, share it with colleagues and so forth. So anyway, thanks again, Shon. I've got just a couple closing slides here. In addition to all the resources Shon was mentioning, we always welcome you to visit our website, uesystems.com. Lots of information there as well as it relates to ultrasound, but also how ultrasound fits into the bigger reliability puzzle. Just as Shon was talking about staying connected with his blogs and the different industry resources out there, we also have Twitter, we've got a blog, and we've got our 2 users groups on LinkedIn, UltraProbe users and our Reliable Asset World group. Just a great place to share information. Maybe go there and share what some of your resolutions are for this year and see what kind of advice and support you might find from your peers. So we definitely encourage participation there. And some dates coming up. So we are deeming February Lubrication Month, and we will be doing a 3-part webinar series with Desk Case. You see the dates there in the topics, so we'll be sending invitations out for that. So if lubrication is of interest to you or not something you've been focused on, but that's a resolution of yours, then we're going to have lots of good stuff coming in February to help you along the way. And then our conferences, we've got Reliable Asset World and Ultrasound World co-located June 2nd through the 5th in sunny and beautiful Clearwater Beach, Florida, which I think we'd all probably love to be there right now, but we'll have to wait just a few more months here. Shon is actually going to be one of our speakers at the Reliable Asset World Conference, so definitely get those dates on your calendar, see if it's something that you're able to attend, and come on down and join us. We've got the rest of our 2015 training calendar as well up on our website, uesystems.com. And with that, I'll leave our contact information up, and any questions or anything that you all have, just let us know, and we'll be sure to get anything over to Shon that you've got questions on. And we'll look forward to seeing you all in our next webinar next month. Have a great rest of the day, everybody, and Shon, thanks again.
Thank you.